welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. This is the fourth episode of our MBA application journey series, where we have conversations with the MBA candidates from top business schools and really learn about their application journeys, and are hoping that the advice that they share can help you with your application. So I do think that it's super value adding in terms of the conversation that we have. I'm Ayush, first year candidate at Columbia Business School, and like the earlier sessions, I'm your host again. Today's guest is one of my very good friends, Tuhina Singh. She is currently an MBA candidate at INSEAD's France campus. I know her from MIT Manipal. That's why we did her engineering together. And post that, she went on to work with Schneider Electric for 7 years. And after that, she joined INSEAD. So welcome, Tuhina.
Thanks, Ayush. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I certainly would have appreciated such a session when I was applying. So I'm happy to be of help, and I hope people can take something away from the session.
That's amazing. Great. And I think before we sort of just jump into the questions, just to quickly explain the structure of the session. So we want to start off by understanding why INSEAD was Tuhina's dream school. Then we'll talk specifically about some of the application points that Tuhina had, for example, like her international experience, her high undergrad GPA at Manipal, and how she sort of used both those points to leverage her application. We then sort of move on to the MBA consultant bit. We know that Tuhina had a consultant and how that sort of added value to her application. We then move on to certain INSEAD specific questions, because INSEAD is one of the most rigorous applications out there. So I think we just asked Tuhina about how she approached some of those questions. And we will close off with a slightly touchy topic, which is the current pandemic and sort of how is it affecting her current business school experience, because she's still at INSEAD. How is it affected her recruitment, and what advice will she have for you guys when you're sort of applying? Like, what are the things that you should keep in mind? So that's how we'll sort of end. And then obviously I will open it up for your questions in about 30 minutes or so. So feel free to post your question in the chat window, and I will try to take up as many questions as I can. Great, awesome. So I think I'm going to just start off with the questions that I have, Tuhina. And I think one of the first questions that comes to my mind when I'm talking to someone at INSEAD is just, how do you sort of decide between a 1 year and a 2 year MBA? And what was your thought process going around, and how did you approach this challenge?
Sure. I do think it's a very important decision to make when you're applying. I'll share how I went about it. So for me, it was certain that I wanted to have a 1 year MBA, and two reasons for that. The first one, well, I'd been working for 7 years, and I did think it was quite a lot of experience already, and I wasn't willing to take out 2 years of my time to invest it in the academic part. And so I was looking for an accelerated MBA program. That was my first reason. Didn't want to invest a lot of time and money into it. And the second reason, I wasn't looking for a major switch in my career. I was really looking to do an MBA to accelerate my career. I was happy to continue in the same industry that I was working in. And so what you're letting go of when you decide to do a 1 year MBA is that for example, my class, we don't have an internship. And I was happy to let go of that because I wasn't looking to try something new and experience something new. And so I was happy to let go of that part. So if you're in a similar situation like me, then I think a 1 year course makes a lot of sense. But if you have fewer years of experience, are really looking to spend a lot of time in campus, try out internships in different industries, then a 2 year would make more sense.
Great, absolutely. And I know INSEAD also offers a program, which is I think a 14-month program where you get an opportunity to do an internship. So how, again, I know you didn't go for that particular one, but how would that compare with the standard 2 year program, which also offers an internship?
Well, yeah, so INSEAD has two classes. The January intake, which graduates in December, they do 2 years of internship. And the other class, which starts out in August and graduates in July, we don't have any internship. So if you're looking to do an internship, trying out something new, then I think the INSEAD one-year program is perfect for that. The curriculum is a lot more rigorous than 2-year courses. So you do end up doing everything of a 2-year MBA. You do have the advantage of internship as well. So you will get everything that you're looking for from a 2-year course. After at With that option, I think at the end of the day, you have to weigh in other things that you're looking for with your MBA, the geography that you're looking to work in the future, the industry that you're looking to work in. You'll have to start thinking about other reasons as well. But yeah, INSEAD does give you the option of doing an internship as well, and every other advantage that a 2-year MBA gives you, INSEAD will give you that too.
That's amazing. Great to hear that. Just moving on to the second question, which is, I mean, there are certain 1-year options, like even outside of Europe. So I think just understanding a little bit about why Europe specifically as a geography. Like, did you also consider like INSEAD Singapore or like some other 1-year programs in the US, etc.?
All right. So I'll start up about the choice. I was already working in France before my MBA. And if in my personal life, I was very happy to be in France, and I was looking to continue to work in France or in neighboring European countries. So you have to really think about where it is that you imagine living in the long term, where you imagine working, and what makes more sense for you. I think that's something that everybody should give a lot of thought to. So for me, it was that I wanted to work in France or in Europe, and hence I decided to look only for European schools. And even in that, within INSEAD, you could either do it in Singapore or in France. And you also have the option of doing an exchange. So you can spend 2 months in Singapore, you can spend 4 months in Singapore, and then come back to France. So you have a lot of flexibility. And you have people who end up doing both. You have people like me who end up doing the whole year at France, and you have some who end up traveling. So how INSEAD advises you to go about it is that your P4, so your recruitment period during your course at INSEAD, is when companies come to campus. So on-campus recruitment happens, and you should be in the campus where you want to work. So if you want to work in Europe, we recommend you to do your recruitment period in France. If you are looking to work in Southeast Asia, then we recommend you to be in Singapore. Now, even for, you can of course also apply for Middle East, and for that as well, you could have opportunities in both campus, but you have to be mindful of which geography you're looking to work at. So that is the recommendation from the recruitment point of view. And the months before the recruitment period, if you're looking to travel, if you want to discover a new geography for some time, have fun. Of course, it's an amazing time to discover a new country. You make a lot of friends at MBA school. So for that reason, you could decide to do 2 months in a different campus. I didn't decide to do it because it really depends on what you're looking for from your MBA. So I wanted to focus on the academics, do a certain projects that I was interested in. And so I decided to spend all of my time at INSEAD in France. And other things as well, of course, you have to think about how much budget you are willing to take out if you want to travel, etc. So you do think of all those, but INSEAD gives you an option to decide accordingly. And apart from Singapore and France, there's also, of course, Abu Dhabi campus where you can spend 2 months if you're looking to work in the Middle East. It's a fantastic opportunity to discover the geography.
Great. And I think what Tuhina is saying is sort of really driving home the point which has come up in like the talks from other candidates also, is that ultimately it's the geography where you see yourself living in, working in. And so I think if you're very sure about that, then obviously applying to a business school, which is also in this geography, sort of opens up work opportunities there. So I think it really, if like, I know, like for me, like I wanted to stay in the US for a bit. So I think for me, it was very clear that that's where I want to go, even though I thought like INSEAD is a great school, but like just in terms of where I see myself like living for the next few years. So again, I think that's a great point. And I think some others people have also spoken about that. So I think really.
Yeah, certainly. And another thing, and I'm sure a lot of people are very flexible about this. So like you knew you wanted to be in the US, I knew I wanted to be in France. But of course, I have so many friends who had no idea and they were very open to this. So again, INSEAD becomes a good school in that way because it's giving you recruitment opportunities all over the globe, a lot in Europe, a lot in Southeast Asia, and a lot in Dubai, in the Middle East. So if you're flexible, again, it's something that you should consider.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Great point about INSEAD. And I think we've talked about this a lot, but just coming to the third question. So other than the things that you already mentioned, like what I know, like INSEAD has been like your dream school for a very, very long time. I mean, like this was like years before, like maybe right after Manipal or so, where we were like not even sure about doing an MBA. But I know you used to say that INSEAD is where I see myself going. So like really, like what are some of the other things that really attracted you to the school?
Right. So, like I said, the geography made sense for me. The 1 year course made sense for me. But apart from that, INSEAD is a place where you have so much diversity. You have people coming in from all cultures, and it really makes you learn how to work with a very diverse set of people. It's something that is very realistic in today's world. We are working with people from, at least in my work experience, we were working with people from all different kinds of backgrounds, and it really trains you to work well and to flourish in such environments. So the diversity of INSEAD was another unique point that really pulled me to the school. And I think something that's important is that you need to find your fit in a school. So you should speak to a lot of people from the school that you're applying to and look if you see some sort of a connection, some sort of a fit to the culture of that particular school, how well you get along with people from that school. I think that's something that's very important. And I felt that fit when I discussed with INSEAD people. And so I would recommend all applicants to, try and speak to a couple of people from the schools that you're looking to apply to, and you'll really get a sense of what you're getting yourself into.
Another very important point which has come up before, just the importance of you speaking to people in schools that you like really want to get into. I think that's again like it's something that people overlook sometimes. They don't see the value in it too much. But again, like the kind of conversation that you have with people, you get to know about the school's culture so much. And again, that's something that you can leverage when you're sort of writing the applications also, right? So
Yeah.
again, that's a
And
yeah.
I've been on the other side. So I was one of those people who didn't give it enough importance. I also felt that it's just important that I get into the school, the fit and everything, we'll look at it later. But I can't stress upon how important it is. And if you're one of somebody like me who was initially feeling very shy to reach out to people that I didn't know, none of my friends were in SEAD. So it was all about randomly reaching out to people on LinkedIn. So don't feel shy doing it. I know you could, but people like us, like Ayush and I, we're very happy to speak to applicants and happy to help you out with the process. We've been in your shoes, we know how it feels. And questions might seem very simple, but there are no stupid questions. So I really encourage everybody to go out to LinkedIn, reach out to people. I'm sure they're happy to take out the time to help you.
And just on that, I wanted to add exactly what you said, Tuhina. Business school people are some of the most friendliest people that you'll ever come across. So really, like even a cold reach out via LinkedIn or something, like I would say like 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 times you can expect a reply back from them. So definitely try that option. With that, Tuhina, just moving on to the next question. So I think this is a question which comes up very often when people don't don't have a very high undergrad GPA, and like they really think that that's something that will hold them back from an application to a top business school. And I know like you had like one of the best GPAs in our batch, like a 9+ in Manipal. But again, like, do you think that's something that gave you a significant edge over some of the other applicants? And like, what advice would you have for people who again don't have a very high GPA, and how do you think they can sort of cover up for this fact, and like in terms of other things like extracurriculum or something?
Right. So I think it's very important to know what are the elements that business schools are looking in their applicants, and that might differ for every school. So I remember what INSEAD was looking for. There were four pillars. One was academic excellence, so the GPA falls into that category. The other was international experience. The third was leadership experience, leadership skills, and the fourth was, who are you outside of your work? So any kind of volunteering that you've done or anything apart from just work and academics. So these are the four pillars, and you cannot be, it's very difficult to be perfect and or very good in all four areas, and nobody is. So, you should really be aware of that. As long as you're able to highlight what you're good at out of these four things, it'll cover up for the others, right? So, for example, I did not have very good experience volunteering or doing things outside of work and academics. I didn't have a lot to say there. So, there's something that I don't have at all. And at that time, I remember thinking, oh, I have friends who worked in Teach for India and so many other initiatives that I don't have. And at that time, I felt like I was at a disadvantage. But everybody can't have everything. I do think that my academic, the GPA, so the academic part and the international experience part helped me. So for everybody, remember, you can't have everything. Highlight the ones that you're good at. And for example, if your academic score is really, really poor, INSEAD in the essays, there is one optional question about talk about something that you would like to tell us, anything that we should know. So if there's anything which you feel is very weak in your application, certainly the school will notice it. This is your opportunity to write about why, if you have a good explanation of why that happened. Maybe you were focusing on other things at that point, and that might be a way to showcase some other strength. So use that column there. So yeah, don't worry about GPA. There are different elements they're looking for. Highlight the ones that you're strong at.
Great. And just talking about the other pillars, which was sort of my next question, which is the international experience. And I know sort of INSEAD specifies and focuses a lot on that. And again, like you being on the right side of that, because I know like you worked in France for about 6 years. But again, do you think like you had a significant edge over other applicants because of that? And like, do you know of people who did not have any international experience, but still sort of got in and like found success in the end?
Right. So let me tell you, I have so many friends in my INSEAD class right now who've never worked outside of their country. So a lot of Indian friends who've never worked outside of India, but similarly in other cases. So a lot of people in the class, of course, have international experience like me, but there is a significant chunk which does not. So again, what is INSEAD looking for here? It's really looking for your ability to work with a diverse set of people, because that's a skill that they are trying to inculcate, trying to get you ready for the world out there where you're working with people from different nationalities. And that's really what they're looking for. Once you're at INSEAD, how well will you work with people who don't think in the same way that you do? So that's what they're looking for when they mention international experience. So it might be that you've, never worked outside of India, but I'm sure you must have been in situations where you're working with people who think in a very different way from you. You have, you clash in the way you work together. And how do you handle these situations? How well are you able to adapt yourself, be flexible in working with people who think differently, and highlight those stories. Highlight the diversity of thought that you've experienced. How you handle those situations. Maybe you worked in projects where there were other teammates who were working from different cultures or different countries, so you might not have, even traveled. Or maybe you did, but maybe you didn't. But how did you, go about working with diverse people? That's what they're looking for. And so it's okay that you haven't worked outside, but in your stories, come up with stories which highlights your ability to work with diverse people.
Sure, great. And that sort of brings on to my next question, which is again, this is something a lot of people debate with, which is the value that an MBA consultant sort of adds to your application. And I know like you ended up hiring an MBA consultant. So if you can just talk a little bit about that experience. And again, what advice would you have for people who are sort of dabbling with that question on whether that like they should make that investment for
Yeah.
an MBA consultant?
Yeah, I think this is something which is pretty personal. I remember the first time I opened up an application for INSEAD, and there were so many questions, and I hadn't done such an exercise ever before in my life. And um, I think what's important is it's going to be it's a different kind of experience writing out applications. I know some people who really enjoy it, who are able to reflect and write really well, but it's not a skill that everybody has. And I consider myself as one of those who didn't have that skill to write really well and to really express my stories. And so I needed some sort of help. Now, this help could be somebody in your life, like a friend or somebody from your family who's been through this process before. They might be able to help you. And at that point, I didn't have anybody that I could rely on. And so I hired a consultant. But know that at the end of the day, even if you hire a consultant, it's not a simple solution, because at the end of the day, you still have to come up with your stories, right? Your consultant's just there to sort of guide you on how to be writing if it's something that you struggle with. So know what kind of support you should expect. You don't have to get a consultant. I don't think it gives anybody an edge, really. If there's anybody else in your life who is ready to help you with your applications, who's able to read, proofread, that's something good. And try to get help from somebody who's been through the process before. So anybody who's already gone through this application process would be in a good position to help you. Again, if you don't have somebody like that in your life, then a consultant might be a good solution. But know what you're getting into. Ask people who've used that consultant before, and don't think it's a simple solution. It's not a shortcut. He or she is not gonna write your answers for you. You still have to do all the brainstorming. It's really about the editing part where I felt I got help.
Right, right. Great, absolutely. And I think just moving on to the next section now, which is about some specific INSEAD application questions, which people don't tend to find in a lot of other business school applications. So I think I'm just going to go through a couple of them, and maybe you can just talk about how you thought of those questions, because again, they're slightly unusual questions. So the first one is the failure question, because again, like people are very used to talking about their successes and their leadership stories, blah blah, and then suddenly a question comes up where you talk about your experience. So how did you sort of approach that question, and like did you have to think of a story? Did you already have a story?
Yeah, so I definitely struggled with that question. I suddenly realized how simple my life had been because I couldn't think of any big failure, and I spent days thinking about it. And I remember somebody gave me very good advice at that point. They said, "Well, this failure doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be that you started a company and it failed and you were bankrupt. It doesn't have to be dramatic at all. It could be something of very small impact or very small scale. It could be just a little project that didn't go well, or a deadline that you missed, or some relationship at work that you didn't handle well, or even personal failure, right? So that's the first thing. Don't think it has to be this huge dramatic failure. It could be a very small thing. That's number one. So tell yourself that, and that I'm sure you might have faced a lot more. And secondly, again, what's important in this is what is your takeaway from this failure? What they're looking for is not what was the failure, it
Hmm.
was how did you handle it then? What did you learn from it? And what would you differently in the future? So keep in mind what they're looking for in this answer. So don't worry about having some big dramatic story. Think about it could be something very small, but write it in a way that you've learned something from it and you'll take something away from it.
Sure. Again, I think what Tuhina said is absolutely right. Like they are not really focusing on how dramatic or how exciting the failure story is, because again, if you try to be too dramatic, you are like on the side where they might think that okay, this is not very realistic. So I think what they're really looking for, as Tuhina mentioned, is the ability to course correct, right? Like when you know that you had failed, like how did you change from that point on? Like did you face similar situations after that, and how did your actions sort of change? So I think again, those are the kind of skills that they're trying to focus on. So I think very rightly said, Tuhina. The next question, which again I think is a very INSEAD specific one, it does come up in some interviews for other business schools, but I think in forms of essays, this is very specific to INSEAD, which is about weaknesses. Again, like people are very confident talking about their strengths, but again, like the moment someone asks you to name your three weaknesses, and again, doing it in a manner that it doesn't like let you down immediately. So again, like would be curious to understand how did you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I do remember coming up with my strengths fairly easily and really struggling with my weakness. What I did, and it worked for me, and I would recommend some of you to try it out. I asked people what they think my weakness is, and trust me, I got a long list immediately. I remember asking my sister and getting this long list of weaknesses, and I asked my sister. So ask somebody from your family, ask some close friends. I remember asking my manager for it, um, and there you start seeing some patterns. So that's one way that I tried and worked well for me. I remember getting a good one from a manager and couple from my family. So that's something you could try. And of course, some people are able to just reflect on things similar to the failure story. If you're just able to spend some time thinking about things that didn't go well, and that's something you could realize from it. But if I tell you what I did, I asked people and I got a longer list than I would have liked.
Right. And I think here also one other thing which is important is that again, it's not the weakness which they're using to assess you, but again, if you can spend some time talking about how are you working on that weakness now, like how do you ensure that you don't make the same mistakes again, like do you take feedback often from people now and like make sure that you're not making that mistake again? So I think again that's something that they are trying to focus on, right?
Yeah, certainly. And there's something else I'd like to add. So, very good point about, what are you taking away from it? So, you might not be changing it completely, but what are you doing to keep it more in check? I think that's really important. So, don't write, this is my weakness and that's it. Next question. No, this is my weakness and here's what I'm doing about it. That's number one. Thanks for adding that, Ayush. Something else that I've seen. Some people avoid answering the question and they try to turn it into a strength. And I've seen it way too often. And trust me, this is a question that's not only for your application, but it'll also come up in your job interviews. It's the most common question that you should, start preparing for. So I know a lot of people who try to say, I'm too much of a perfectionist or I work too hard. People see through these. Everybody has some weakness. Don't feel shy to say it. They're really looking for how self-aware you are. So do try and answer the question honestly and do show what you're doing to work towards it.
Absolutely. Authenticity is the word that I thought about, right? Like how it's
Absolutely.
important to be authentic and like not necessarily always showing your best self. So
Yeah,
great,
and
great point.
self-aware, right? So don't try to turn it into
Yeah.
a strength question.
Right, absolutely. Last couple of questions, audience, and then I think I'm going to just open it up to you all for questions. So the next one, Tuhina, is just about the interview process. Again, I think INSEAD is one of the few schools that actually does a couple of interviews, if I'm not wrong. So how was your interview experience overall, and how did you sort of prepare for the interview questions at INSEAD?
Right. So we have two kinds of interviews at for the INSEAD application. One is video interview. So I think there were four video interviews. You'll get a link. There'll be a question that pops up on the screen. You'll have 30 seconds to think about it and a minute to answer. And there are four questions back to back. So that was the first one. And the second one, you have two interviews with alumni around you. So for the first one, which is the video interviews, very common interview questions like strengths, weaknesses, failure, leadership experience. Tell me about a time this happened, that happened. So you'll get these questions very easily on Google. You need to be prepared with stories of your life, your experiences, to answer those questions. For each of the different questions, come up with a story that you've been in. So that's how I would prepare for the video question. Go through the list of standard questions, do mock interviews, try saying it in front of the screen. Your screen presence is again important. So that's how I prepare for the first one. The second one, with the alumni, I think it's very relaxed. These are not those stress interviews. I think these are really conversations. And what the alumni is looking for is mostly how well you would fit in the INSEAD culture. So once again, talking before to alumni would help you in these interviews. But again, it's just very conversational. So just be calm, confident, and it's very conversational. Nothing to be worried about at all.
Again, I think a couple of points that Tuhina is really driving home very hard. One is how you prepare for the interviews is just by practicing by yourself, right? Like look at the mirror and start speaking. Ask some of your friends to interview. So again, like I know, like during an earlier part of when I used to do interviews, I used to think that, oh yeah, interviews I should be able to do. But again, like it's the whole experience of when you're actually trying to speak to someone is very different. I mean, like you could have some thoughts which are very straight in your head, but when you actually start talking, it's a very different experience altogether. So just going through that mock interview process, I think it's super important. I think the other thing which Tuhina said, which is again a very important point to note, is that these are not supposed to be trick interviews. These are
Yeah,
not stress questions or anything. They're not trying to like make you sweat on your seat that if they ask you like a hard question. I think that's not gonna happen. it's
absolutely not.
it's very conversational. I think just knowing your story really well, knowing your inflection points in your stories really well, and they're seeing if you're able to justify MBA as a right move in your career, right? Like, why is it that you even want to do an MBA? I mean, like, those are the kind of straightforward questions. And it's funny how people do screw up even in those simple questions. Again, like
Sure.
it's a very straightforward process, and I think just thinking about it in a very casual way is also very important, is what
Yeah.
I wanted to add.
One more thing I'd like to add, Ayush. Sorry, I keep going back to it, but
Hmm.
even if you have your stories correct, something else that people and I myself, of course, struggled with is timing yourself. So if you have a minute to answer, the star approach. If you haven't looked up the star approach, maybe you guys could Google it now. But make sure that you give enough context that they understand it, but not you're not so verbose that you keep repeating yourself. You have to be very succinct in your answer, and your answer has to be very rich in that 1 minute. So that's something that only practice will give you. So it's not only about having your stories right in your head, it's really about practicing and making sure you're giving enough content while not being verbose at the same time.
Right, absolutely. Second last question to Ina. So just overall reflection on the experience. If you, this is like one of my favorite questions. Like if you were to do it like all over again, like what would be the 2 or 3 things that you do differently?
Okay. The first one, I would talk to more people, talk to more alumni. I was shy to not reach out to people on LinkedIn because I think they would have better things to do with their time than to help me, but I was wrong. So reach out to more people. The second one, which I would certainly change, look up the career development center of the school. So in terms of the on-campus recruitment, what are the type of companies that are coming to campus? Don't just go after the brand. I know a lot of us tend to go after the brand of the school, but look after what happens after the school. Where do people usually end up? Some schools are consulting schools, some schools are finance schools. Find out the sector that you want to work in. How many of the companies come to hire in that sector? How many of those companies are open to sponsor visas for international students? So really go in knowing what graduating from that school would look like. I didn't do enough of that, and that's something that I would recommend all of you to do. It's not only about the school, it's really about what happens after and where you end up working. That's my second one. And the third one, I think I could have found out a little bit more about the academic curriculum of the school, really looking at what kind of professors, who are the star professors, what are the star courses. Is there any particular course that INSEAD has that other schools don't? So a little bit more about the academic curriculum. What are the kind of electives I would like to take? It's something that helps and would certainly also help in your application process, I think.
Great, absolutely. And I think a lot of them would be things that even I would want to do again if I were to go back and apply again. Last question to Ina, and then we sort of move on to questions from the audience. So I think this is an important one, and I know you are sort of living through it, but how has the current pandemic sort of affected your business school experience overall, even your recruitment? Because I know you're sort of going through a recruitment right now. And again, what advice would you have for admissions for people who would be applying right now for the 2021 intake? So they're starting in August of 2021.
Right. So, well, certainly we've been affected by the COVID-19 situation. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, we have lots to be thankful for. All of us are healthy and safe in this situation. So yeah, we have to be mindful of that, take some perspective. The classes for us right now are happening online, so over Zoom. So it's a pity. We were lucky that we spent 6 to 7 months together in school to really know all of our classmates, and so doing classes online is a pity. But at the same time, you know the people, so it's okay. You're able to connect with them online. Of course, I miss being on campus with my friends, but this is the best alternative, and we're trying to make the most of the situation. Um, for the people who are applying right now, certainly the situation will be much better by the time you guys are graduating. I do think that our class, which is graduating this July, would be the worst hit. And I do certainly hope that it only gets better for you guys. We are still having companies come in to recruit. So things aren't also bad. Of course, some companies have dropped out, but there are still a lot of companies who are coming into campus. I'm going through a couple of interviews right now myself. And so my recommendation would be, if you're applying now and you're going to be graduating in 2 years or 3 years from now, don't stop your application process, keep it going. But at the same time, like I said, find out about what's happening in the school, talk to people who are graduating this year like me, or even next year. So the people graduating in 2021, keep finding out what's happening, how many companies are coming. And so keep in mind what's going to be your recruitment process, and yeah, see the kind of companies that you are looking for. Are they still hiring? Are they still sponsoring visas? So find out more about it. I only think it's going to get better for you guys. So keep applying. Don't stop your applications. Keep it going, and then at the same time, try and find out. Keep your eyes open to what's happening in the world.
Great, absolutely. Thank you, Tuhina. I think we'll just take a few questions from the audience. We have a lot of them. People seem to be super engaged. So great. So I think the first question I want to take is Sania's question. This is specific to the two different intakes as INSEAD. So I think what she wants to know is how different are the recruitment options in the two intakes? And I think obviously ignoring the fact that one offers an internship and the other one doesn't. I think her question is more on, in terms of full-time opportunities, like what are the differences?
Right. So I think the most important difference is the fact that you can do internship with the January intake. And so a lot of those internships convert to full-time offers. So your last couple of months at INSEAD are a lot more relaxed because you have a job already in hand. So that's a major difference. But apart from that, the same companies come to campus. Most of the companies, I would say 90% of the companies come 2 times to INSEAD, and they have been for very long. So it's not a very major difference between both of the classes. I do know of some companies which benefit the January intake, which graduates in December. There are very few companies, but there are some which come only for that class. And the reason is because the recruitment matches with the US recruitment schools. It happens at the same time. So there are some companies who only hire at that period, and they go to all US schools and INSEAD at the same time. And they hence don't end up coming for the July graduating class, but it's very, very few. So overall, I would say there's no difference. Very few, if at all.
Awesome. Yeah, I think other than the fact that one offers you to do an internship and the other one does, I think Tuhina is absolutely right. There won't be any significant differences in terms of the recruitment opportunities. Tuhina, there are a lot of questions around work experience. So the first one, again, this is for someone with 12 years of experience. And again, like what I know you are like you went in with 7 years of experience, which is again slightly higher the average that typical business schools have, like in terms of incoming candidates. But like again, for someone who's way beyond the average, like what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, actually, it's funny enough, but INSEAD average experience is 7, so I wasn't
Oh,
over. I
okay.
was absolutely at the average. So I do think that INSEAD has a higher number of experience than US schools. I think that's true. So um, I have a lot of friends who have a lot more experience. I have friends who have a lot less experience. So there's really a range over here. If I just look at it from a simple age, I think the average age is 29, and average years of experience is 7. But you have people who are 35, you have people who are 24. So it really varies. As long as you're clear about why it is that you want to do an MBA, and you're able to convince the school that this is the right path for you, that's all they're looking for. And trust me, business schools are looking for diversity. So if you're bringing something different to the table, they are more interested in you, I would say. So I wouldn't worry about it. And as long as it's helping you in your path, you have to be honest about it and express that to the admissions committee.
Sure. And I think a question which is on the other side of the spectrum. So I think Kashish is like if he has, I think, a 2-year work experience, and he's like, is it enough for schools like INSEAD? And I think he's asking about LBS and HEC Paris
Yeah.
also.
So I'll speak for INSEAD. So like I said, the average is 7, but you have people on both extremes. So I do have people with a lot less experience. So there are people out there. You just have to be able to show to the admissions committee through your essays, through your interviews, that you have the right amount of exposure and that you're bringing something to the table at INSEAD. So what are they looking for? They're looking for students who, bring something rich to the conversations that happen in class. And so that's the only thing they're looking for, right? If they think that you haven't had enough exposure in the world, you're not really bringing something. But if you think that you are, and you just have to convey it out to them, and there are a lot of exceptions with very little work experience like you, so I wouldn't worry about it. I would just think about what you're bringing and how you're able to communicate that.
Sure, absolutely. I think the next question is around scholarships. So Rohit wants to know if you could just talk a little bit about the scholarships that INSEAD offers. What are the different kinds, and how can one sort of think about that when they're applying?
Right. So this should have been one of my things that I wish I'd done differently. I didn't pay attention to the scholarship part, and I'm glad, Rohit, that you're thinking about it. I was just focusing on getting the admission, and I didn't think through it. So INSEAD has a list of different scholarships that they offer. I'm sure you'll get that information on the website. After you get admitted, I think I can't remember at what time, but they reach out to you. INSEAD will reach out to you. They'll give you the list of scholarships. You can apply for 5 different scholarships. Each of the scholarships has a different process on how to apply. They might ask you to write a few more essays, or they might have some interviews. So it really differs on the different kinds of scholarship. There are certain scholarship for certain geographies. So students from Asia, students from developing countries, students from Africa. There are some for women. So it's really there are many different types. So go to that list. I'm sure you'll find it on the website. Look at their own different criteria. They mostly have some essays to fill out. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Great. So I think you probably touched on this a little bit, I think, but Tanya wants to specifically know about what the current job scenario is, like again, post MBA, and like if you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
So I think she's talking about current scenario. So for my class, because of the corona situation,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I
So it's
think so.
definitely
Yeah.
been, like everywhere else, there's definitely there's a hit in the number of companies that come to campus. So our recruitment process had almost started when this happened, and so there were a lot of companies which ended up coming to campus. And we even did a first round with them, and then they started dropping out. Then they started freezing hiring. So I have to say a lot of companies did freeze hiring, but there are still a lot of companies that ended up coming. And I would say the majority would be consulting companies. There are a lot of consulting companies who ended up coming to school, and a lot of my classmates already have offers with them. So it's going to be lower than other years. It's going to be harder than other years. But there's still jobs out there that people are looking out for. But at the same time, I think INSEAD is, stepping up and providing us a lot of support. They're going to be providing us support even after we graduate for those who were not able to land jobs immediately, just because a lot of companies have frozen hiring. But the same companies will start opening up hiring once the worst has passed. And so INSEAD is going to support its students and its alumni even after graduation. So the school's doing a great job. And I think all of us have to, of course, be patient and just be realist about the situation that we are in.
Sure, absolutely. So the last couple of questions that I would take up. Just give me a second. Yes, and again, you might not have an answer to this, but like, is INSEAD sort of considering deferrals for people they've already offered admissions to? And again, this is for people who would be joining this year.
Right. So for this year, so I know that INSEAD allows you to defer normally, not for the corona situation, but anyway, I know a couple of people who deferred for whatever personal reason. So I know that you can defer. I don't know specifically about corona. I'm sure there might be a lot of people asking, so I don't have an answer to that. Sorry, Rohit, I haven't looked into it. I do know that INSEAD is having conversations with the people who are going to be joining in August this year, and they're discussing different options very openly with the students. I think some of those options have been to start the class a little late, hoping that we're able to start doing classes, because INSEAD realizes that all the students are looking for an on-campus experience and not online classes. Especially in the beginning, it's very important to connect with your class. So I do believe INSEAD is discussing these options of starting late, but I have no official communication. I haven't looked into it. This is just from conversations with people I know are going to be starting in August.
Right, absolutely. Just the last couple of questions, Tuhina. So I think one is just around. So basically, Ravi wants to know like the kind of people that you should reach out to, and what was your strategy. So I have an answer, but I think would love to hear like what your
Sure.
answer to this is.
Yeah. So I'll start, and of course, please do continue. So, good question over here. I think what you should do is to look for people who you might have some similarities with. It could be that you work in the same industry. It could be that you have something in common with this person. It could be the school that you've attended. It could be the city you're from. It could be some interests that are common based on what their LinkedIn profile says. So if this just helps. It doesn't have to be a mandatory thing, but it'll help you to connect with the person. So when you send the person a message, you can say, oh, hey, you and I went to the same school or whatever. So if you're able to build a connection on something common, that helps. But otherwise, I would reach out to the younger ones who have still in mind their application process. I think they would be a lot more open and perhaps even a lot more available to help you out. So I'd look out for people who've just applied or just graduated or are currently studying. I've talked to people who you have something in common with. Those would be my two things.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So basically, having some sort of a link to start the conversation, right? That either like the same undergrad or same sort of work, similar industry work experience that you've had, or again, like similar goals, right? You see someone who's worked in investment banking post MBA, and like, you know, you want to get into investment banking. So just reaching out with that common interest is again like a good strategy to reach out.
And I would
Great.
highlight that in the message that you write, right? So you should appreciate that this person's going to take out time for you. So make sure you write the message in a way that, really shows your interest and why you're reaching out to that particular person and how much it would help you. So, show that side of you in the message when you send it out to them so that when they read your message, they feel like taking out the time for you.
Right, absolutely. Last question, and I think it's a great question by Vinay. So what he wants to know is, despite having diverse experiences in a long career span, career progression is something that might not play in that case, obviously, because you've switched between different experiences. So how relevant would career progression be in the application? Again, and Tuhina is on this side of the spectrum where she did have career progression because she stayed with the same firm for 7 years. But again, Tuhina, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, and I can definitely add to that, considering I switched like 3 or 4 fields before applying for an MBA.
So I'm not sure I truly understood what the question is. Does it say, let me read that again. Despite
Sure.
having diverse experiences, career progression is something might not play in this case. How relevant is career progression? So, do you mean staying in the same path and really, I don't know, getting
Yeah.
promotions in
So,
the
so
same path?
like, so if you consider like 2 examples, like consider you and me, right? I mean, you had like 7 years of experience in Schneider. So again, definitely sort of risen through the ranks because you've had like this deep experience. Whereas for me, I sort of had 2 jobs, very different jobs before an MBA. Also, one different graduate degree that I did, which again was in a completely different space. So again, like for me, career progression wasn't something that I could point out necessarily because again, like I was like switching around quite a lot. So again, like the importance of career progression in the application versus you showing a lot of diversity in your background pre-MBA.
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, right? You have people who've done both. You have a lot of people who've made a lot of progression in the same field, but you have others who've, I've met people at INSEAD who've started something and failed at it and then started something completely different. I know somebody who's worked in marketing, then started a food truck and then moved into consulting. And so, people have done different things. I think what's important to show is that if you've done a lot of switching, then what was the reason? What was it that you're looking for? Really tying your stories together, showing that there was some common thread, and or even if there wasn't a common thread, what were the reasons why you made those decisions. So I think just being self-aware, being authentic, and sort of knowing what you truly want from this MBA is what's important. It doesn't really matter what you did before. It just matters, what are you bringing to the table and why do you think this MBA is going to help you in your path. But apart from that, you could have had multiple promotions, or you could have just been switching and trying out different things. You see all kinds of people in business school, so I wouldn't worry about either of them. What I would like to show is what have you learned from whatever your experience has been. What have you learned from it? What are you bringing to the table? And why is this MBA the right thing for you in your career path so far?
Exactly what even I was going to add, which is just, I think it's you focusing on the inflection points, which is important. Like, don't think that just because you switch around too much, like and the fact that you won't be able to show career progression, like people are going to, like the admissions committee is going to look down on you. But it's really the rationale and the story that you have, right? Like, why is it that you went on to do something, and then why is it that you want to do an MBA now? So as long as you can justify that, again, the number of different moves that you've had is sort of irrelevant, is what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also tend to think that as much as career progression gives you a lot of exposure and you can talk about, the responsibilities that you kept handling, at the same time, diversity of experience brings a wonderful story, I think, for people. I've met people who've done such different things and they just have such interesting stories and they've learned such different things from all of their experiences. And these things help you out even in job applications. You're able to talk about the variety of things you've seen in your life and what you learned from each of those is something that just helps. So either of the two, whatever you've done, just talk about what it has taught you and show the strengths that you bring because of it.
Great. And so I think with that, I want to close the session. There are a lot of other questions, but again, like feel free to reach out to the e-GMAT team or me, and like we would be happy to ask for Tuhina's advice on those questions and sort of get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much, Tuhina. This was super value adding. And yeah, really appreciate your time on this.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed talking to you about this. It was good to relive all the things that we went to. I genuinely hope that this was of help to some of you, if not all of you. I hope that you took away something from this. I certainly enjoyed myself today talking to you, Ayush.
Great. Awesome. And one last plug about next Monday's session. So we're going to be talking with Nishant, who is an ex-e-GMATer. He's my batchmate at Columbia Business School, and he's going to be shedding some light on how he leveraged his unconventional background in oil and gas to make an application for Columbia Business School, and also talk about what value did e-GMAT add to like improving his GMAT score from 570 to 740. So again, like people who have a lot of GMAT related questions, like feel free and definitely join in for the next session with Nishant next Monday happening at the same time. Cool. Thank you, Tuhina, and great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and see you next week.
Good luck with your
Bye bye.
applications and thanks for the questions. Bye.
Yes. Bye bye. Thanks.